Okay guys, so I wanted to just go over this ecology packet real quick because I'm going to go over that in class with the students. So let me get this up here. Let me enlarge it here. So basically we're going to end this year with just trying to get as much ecology in as we can. Normally I have about 9 weeks to do all of this, and we do some labs and different things like that. But with COVID, we just have not had the time. So I just want to kind of quickly go through this and kind of talk about some stuff because that's what I'm going to do with them. So for example, a food chain is going to show, I know a lot of times we think of, oh, it's showing us what things eat. But in the science world, they tend to see it as energy flow. So how is energy flowing? So if you look here, it starts with these trophic levels, a primary producer. Now, producer is making its own food, right? That's producing. So that's why if you look at the grassland biome right here, we have grass, and for the pond, we have algae. Those are my producers. Now, here's the thing, is that even above producers, like where are the producers getting their energy from? And they're getting it from the sun. So really we have sun, if we're looking at energy flow anyway, we have sun, and then we have a grass. It gives the grass energy, and then the grasshopper is getting energy from the grass, the rat getting energy from the grasshopper, snake getting energy from the rat, and the hawk is the last one there. It's getting energy from the snake. Now, food chains can only be so long. They're not going to be like multiple like levels, because each time that you pass on energy, you lose a little bit of energy, right? The sun holds 100% of the energy. It gives some energy to grass. Grass uses some of that energy to produce food and to do different things. So it uses some of its energy, so the grasshopper only gets a little bit of that energy from the sun that originally came from the sun. Same with the grasshopper. It's moving around, it's doing things, it's using some energy. So then the rat only gets a little bit of that energy. So eventually you get down to where you're just not getting enough energy for things. Okay, so there we've got 3 different biomes there. Pond, grassland, and ocean, and they're showing you those. So the food web is when you have a bunch of these intertwined with each other, which we'll see here in a second. We have our pyramid, and if you look, it's got our autotrophs here. From here to here is my heterotrophs, which means that they have to eat food. They can't just make their own food. But then as you go up, we have primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary. And that's about as far as we normally get before like you are at your top level predators there. All right. Another big one here is it says arrows in a food chain show the flow of energy. So when I do this, if I have like grass and I go like this to grasshopper, a lot of times kids are like, that looks like the grass is eating the grasshopper, and they get confused by that, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's just showing like, hey, the energy from grass is now going to the grasshopper. Okay, so that's how we'll draw the arrows. They talk about trophic levels here, the primary producers, who are your herbivores, really. Your primary producers. Your primary consumers are really your herbivores, right? They're primary. So they are eating plants. They're eating grass, right? So it talks about that here. These organisms, the producers are autotrophs. Here it talks about the primary consumers. They're also called herbivores, or your plant eaters. Secondary consumers, they eat. Primary consumers, they're carnivores because they're eating, right? They're eating other animals, but they could also, it could be something that eats plants, so you could get an omnivore in there. Tertiary consumers then are eating secondary, quaternary eating tertiary. Okay, food ends with a top predator that really nothing else will kill. When any organism dies, it is eventually eaten by detritivores like vultures, worms, crabs. They're breaking down, they're decomposing, and then the energy continues. It's like this big cycle. All right, and of course you can be at different levels on this food chain. So let's see here. Oh, I talked a little bit about this one on number of organisms. It says in any food web, energy is lost each time one organism eats another. So I already talked about that. And here's kind of the rule of each level has about 10% less energy available because of energy lost, right? So there's that. Equilibrium, as the number of carnivores in a community increases, they eat more and more of the herbivores. So that decreases herbivore population. It then becomes harder and harder for the carnivores to find food, right? It's like they ate all their food and now they run out. So what happens then is your carnivores begin to die off because there's not enough food. And when they begin to die off, then your herbivores kind of make a comeback. And it kind of does this up and down, which we will see in a worksheet here later this week. All right, so anyways, when you're looking at this, when you're doing this, I'm looking at this, I'm like, sun. Who is getting energy from the sun? Grasses. The zebra is eating the grass, and then maybe it's the lion eating the zebra. But you can see, once again, the arrows are pointing towards who is getting that energy. Right? The lion's getting energy from the zebra, so energy flow. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all these, but that's kind of how that one is. Here, what do the arrows in a food chain represent? They are representing energy flow. I cannot say that enough. They're representing energy flow. A food chain starts with I don't know what I'm going to say the sun, but I don't know how they want to word that. A primary energy source is what they want there. Primary energy source, the sun. Organisms that make their own food are called autotrophs or primary producers. Number 4, organisms that eat plants are called herbivores or primary consumers. And an animal with no natural enemies is a top predator. Or a consumer maybe, but not all consumers are your top predators. All right, so looking at this, it says there are more producers, guys. This is the biggest part of this pyramid. And there has to be. Think about that. If it were the opposite, if there weren't enough producers, my herbivores would have no food, and if my herbivores had no food, they would die, then my carnivores would die. So we must have more plants than anything else, or I guess just not plants, but producers, autotrophs. Organisms that eat other organisms are called consumers. Organisms that make their own food, once again, are autotrophs or producers. You're just using this chart to help you answer these questions. All right, grass is a producer, an autotroph, either one is fine. Zebras are herbivores, or you could have written primary consumer. And lions are, you could have said top predators, consumers. There's a bunch of different things you could have said there. All right, so walking through this, I'm not going to do too much of this. I'm just going to grade that. I'm going to see how you guys did on these quizzes. Same thing with this. You're just drawing a line to, what your the correct answer. Now this, it says the trophic level of an organism is the position it holds in a food chain. For example, plants are producers, zebras are primary consumers because they eat the grass, and lions are secondary consumers because they eat zebras. Right organisms for each trophic level. So I'll be looking at this and see what you do. It didn't have to be the zebras, the lions. It could literally be like, I'm going to put grasshopper here, and you could have more than one organism in here. A bird eats a grasshopper, and a hawk might eat that smaller bird. Okay, or a cat. I could have put a cat up here. I don't know about you guys, my cats are constantly killing birds. So you could do that. Now you could have put, this is just something I came up with off the top of my head. You could have written a number of different food pyramids here. All right, so now let's look at this. It says identify the producers. So if I'm looking at the producers, they're going to be here. There's going to be no arrows to them. There are no arrows to either one of those. So those are my producers, the plants. My primary consumers are going to be coming directly off of my plants. So the mouse, I think that's a grasshopper, right? The squirrel, okay, coming directly off of there. My secondary consumers, then I'm looking at my primaries here, and there's a secondary. Once again, look at this. The mouse can be a secondary. Do you notice this? It has a red line. It is a primary consumer, but look at this. Here to here, it is a secondary consumer. Just like if I do, let me pick a different color here. If I do here to here, my fox is a secondary consumer. Let's see here, 1, 2, I'm sorry, a tertiary. So there's 1, 2, 3, it's a tertiary consumer. Or I can go here to here and it becomes a secondary. So it doesn't just have to fall under one, okay? It can be, and depending on the food chain, it can be multiples. Which I'm really gonna hit on that with the kids. So for this one, we could have a secondary consumer, it could be a tertiary. Let's see if we can get quaternary out of this. I wonder if we can. I don't know if we, I don't know. We can. I'm trying to see if I have any like that on here. Okay, so I could go 1, 2, 3, 4. So my owl could be a quaternary. All right, so my owl could also go 1, 2, 3. Let's see if we have a 1, 2 to my owl. I don't think so. I don't think so off the top of my head. I can't see it. But anyways, so they can be multiple things. They don't have to be just one thing. Right? Like even us, if we were to look at a food chain, maybe I just ate some rice and lettuce, so that would make me a primary consumer, but I also had some chicken in there. So that would make me like a secondary consumer. So just for lunch today, I'm in 2 food chains, one being a primary consumer, one being a secondary consumer. All right, this is just some definitions. Remember, herbivores are eating plants, carnivores meat, omnivores are eating both. If you look at these decomposers are breaking things down, then you have saprophytes, which are also a little bit like decomposers, a little bit. Using the organisms named below, create a food web which represents the flow of energy between organisms. So we're drawing the arrows. So I'm looking here and I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, who is my producer? And it's right here, grass and grains. So then I'm like, okay, well, who then? I'm going to do, I guess, bread. Who's next? Who's my primary consumers? Oh, here's some shrubs too. Sorry, shrubs. Okay, so then I'm like, okay, well, my birds are going to eat that. My rabbits will eat this. My insects. Now look though, my shrubs, maybe my rabbits eat my shrubs. Maybe the insects are also eating the shrubs. All right, so then let's go beyond that. And I'll say, okay, well, a snake could eat a bird. So could a fox. But look, so could a hawk. Wolves might. I mean, you just never know. An owl might. Insects. There are so many ways you can go about this. A hawk could eat a rabbit. A wolf could eat a rabbit. All right, so then you're just making, and these food webs can look very, very tricky. They can look a little crazy. So yeah, well, we'll go about right there. Because once you start, you start to get lots of arrows. I'm trying to see here if there's, I'm going to stop there, but you can start to get a lot of arrows, and that's fine. It can start to look a little crazy. Okay, now this is just showing energy, the energy that you are getting when you eat something. So look at this. You can see where our plant-based stuff here, look at how much energy you're getting. Like you're getting into the thousands, all right? And then when you start to get into our protein, look, you don't get as much energy. And that is simply because it's farther down in the food chain or the food web, right? Like if I'm eating chicken eggs, the sun gave energy to the meal, what am I trying to think of? Oh guys, I completely went blank. I think it was up here. Do I see it? To grains, that's the word I'm trying to look for is grains. Sorry, it took me that long to figure out grains. So say the chicken are eating grains. Those grains got energy from the sun, but it didn't get all of the sun's energy, right? The sun has 100% energy. And then you get, the grains take some of that energy, but then the grains use some of the energy that it gets, and then the chickens eat the grain, and they get some whatever energy's left, and then I finally eat the chicken, so I'm getting less there. Okay, I'm not saying that, like, you're not getting energy when you eat meat, like you are, but just not as much. So, there is that. And we're not talking about weight or amounts of food. I'm talking about just pure energy. All right. This was organizing the data from least energy to most energy. You're ranking them. And then you're calculating averages, all that. So, I mean, that's about where I'll end with them. There's this glossary of words. And that's it. All right, so I just want to make sure I did hit on some of this with you guys, because I am in class too, so figured I'd post this video for you guys to also watch. All right, if you need anything at all, let me know. Have a good day. Bye.